The radio crackled with desperation at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn silence like a scream in a cathedral. Mayday, Mayday, this is Bravo 6-1. We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Require immediate air support, over. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Diesel Rodriguez, and anyone who knew the SEAL's reputation understood that if Diesel was calling for help, the situation had descended beyond critical into something approaching apocalyptic. The mission had been classified as routine, a simple extraction of a high-value target from a compound nestled in the mountainous regions of eastern Afghanistan. Intelligence suggested minimal resistance, perhaps a handful of poorly equipped fighters. The 8-man SEAL team had inserted under cover of darkness, expecting to complete their objective and exfiltrate before sunrise painted targets on their backs. Instead, they had walked into a hornet's nest that someone had been shaking for hours. What they found waiting for them defied every piece of intelligence they'd received. The compound wasn't lightly defended, it was a fortress. Machine gun nests commanded every approach, mortar teams had pre-registered fire on likely assault routes, and snipers occupied elevated positions with fields of fire that turned the surrounding terrain into a killing field. The SEALs, masters of their craft and veterans of countless operations, found themselves pinned down in a shallow depression that offered minimal cover from the withering crossfire that erupted the moment they breached the perimeter. Bravo 6-1, this is Overlord. We're scrambling close air support. ETA 12 minutes, came the reply from the Tactical Operations Center. But 12 minutes might as well have been 12 hours. Rodriguez could hear the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds, could see muzzle flashes winking like deadly stars from positions that seemed to surround them completely. His men were already low on ammunition, and 2 were wounded, not critically, but enough to slow their movement and complicate any attempt at breaking contact. The sky above remained stubbornly empty, devoid of the familiar drone of rotors or the scream of jet engines that typically heralded salvation. The SEALs pressed themselves deeper into what little cover the rocky terrain provided, returning disciplined bursts of fire while conserving their dwindling ammunition. Each second stretched like an eternity, punctuated by the crack of bullets overhead and the growing realization that their usual tactical advantages had evaporated. They were ghosts who had suddenly found themselves visible, predators who had become prey, and the hunter was closing in with methodical precision. Something was very wrong with this picture, and the pieces of the puzzle were painted in muzzle flashes and written in blood. The enemy knew exactly where they were, exactly when they were coming, and exactly how to counter every move they made. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated, planned, and executed with a level of sophistication that suggested someone had been watching, waiting, and preparing for this exact moment. The SEALs found themselves fighting not just for their mission, but for their lives, against an enemy who seemed to know their playbook better than they did. The radio crackled again, but this time the voice was different, calmer, steadier, carrying an accent that spoke of Southern comfort food and Sunday morning church bells. Bravo 6-1, this is Ghost Rider. I've got eyes on your position. You boys look like you could use some help down there. The transmission sent a ripple of confusion through the Tactical Operations Center. Ghost Rider wasn't on the mission roster, wasn't part of the planned air support package, and according to every official record, shouldn't have existed in that airspace at that moment. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez pressed his face deeper into the rocky soil as another burst of automatic weapons fire chewed the ground inches from his position. Ghost Rider, Bravo 6-1, will take help from whoever's offering. What's your platform and armament? His voice carried the controlled desperation of a professional soldier who understood that pride was a luxury he couldn't afford when his men's lives hung in the balance. The response came with a chuckle that seemed almost inappropriate given the circumstances. Well now, that's classified, sugar, but I reckon I've got enough bite to make your problems go away. You just keep your heads down and let Mama handle this. The familiarity in the tone, the casual endearment, the complete lack of proper radio protocol. It all combined to create a surreal moment that made the SEALs wonder if they were hallucinating from stress and adrenaline. Major General Patricia Hatchet Morrison sat in the Tactical Operations Center, her weathered hands gripping a coffee cup that had long since gone cold. 27 years of military service had taught her to recognize voices, and something about Ghost Rider's transmission tickled the edges of her memory like a half-remembered song. The accent was pure Georgia peach, but underneath it lurked something else, a competence that couldn't be faked, and a confidence that came from facing death and making it blink first. She leaned toward her communications officer, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned every one of her stars through blood, sweat, and the kind of decisions that kept lesser officers awake at night. Find out who Ghost Rider is and get me everything we have on them. Now. The mountains of Afghanistan had swallowed countless secrets over the decades, but they were about to give up one that would reshape everything anyone thought they knew about air combat, about heroism, and about the lengths to which some warriors would go to answer a call for help. The SEALs continued to fight for their lives in the Rocky Depression, unaware that their salvation was approaching on wings they couldn't see, piloted by hands they wouldn't recognize, guided by a heart that beat with the rhythm of duty and the stubborn refusal to let good people die on her watch. The enemy fire intensified as if sensing that something was about to change, muzzle flashes creating a deadly constellation in the pre-dawn darkness. Rodriguez could feel the weight of command pressing down on him like a physical force. These men had followed him into hell because they trusted his judgment, and now that trust might cost them everything. The tactical situation was deteriorating by the minute, ammunition was running critically low, and the promised air support was still 8 minutes away, an eternity in combat time. But Ghost Rider was out there somewhere, a mysterious guardian angel with a southern drawl and classified armament. In the calculus of war, sometimes the unknown was the only variable that offered hope. The first sign that Ghost Rider was more than just a voice on the radio came as a whisper of displaced air, so subtle that most of the combatants missed it entirely. But Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez had spent enough time in war zones to develop an almost supernatural awareness of his environment, and something made him lift his head just enough to scan the sky above. What he saw defied explanation, a shadow against shadows, moving with the fluid grace of a predator that had evolved beyond the need for sound or fury. The aircraft was unlike anything in the standard military inventory, its profile suggesting stealth capabilities that bordered on science fiction. "Jesus Christ," whispered Staff Sergeant Tommy Reaper McKinnon, the team's designated marksman, as he caught sight of the mysterious aircraft through his scope. "What the hell is that thing?" The question hung in the air unanswered, because none of them had ever seen anything like it. The aircraft moved with the silence of death itself, positioning overhead with the patience of a hawk circling prey. Ghost Rider's voice crackled through their radios again, and this time there was no humor in the tone, only the cold professionalism of someone who had done this dance many times before. "Bravo 6-1. I need you to mark your position with IR strobes and then get everyone as low as they can go. I'm about to make some folks very unhappy, and I'd hate for y'all to catch any of the fallout." The instructions were delivered with the casual confidence of someone who had never failed to deliver on a promise, but the underlying steel in the voice suggested that failure wasn't even considered a possibility. Rodriguez immediately began issuing orders to his team, his voice carrying across their tactical frequency with the authority of someone who had learned to lead by example rather than rank. "All Bravo elements, activate IR markers and get down. We've got a guardian angel making a house call." The SEALs responded with the fluid efficiency that marked elite units, each man knowing his role and executing it without hesitation. The infrared strobes began their silent pulsing, invisible to the naked eye but blazing like beacons to anyone with the proper equipment. The silence that followed was pregnant with anticipation, broken only by the continued chatter of enemy small arms fire and the occasional crump of mortar rounds impacting nearby. The SEALs pressed themselves into whatever cover they could find, muscles coiled with the tension of warriors who understood that the next few minutes would determine whether they went home to their families or joined the growing list of heroes who had given everything in service to something larger than themselves. Then Ghost Rider struck, and the mountain learned what precision looked like when guided by hands that understood both mercy and wrath. The first target simply ceased to exist. One moment, a machine gun nest was pouring devastating fire into the SEAL's position, its muzzle flash strobing like an angry star against the mountainside. The next moment, there was nothing but silence and a small crater where trained killers had been manning their weapon. No explosion, no dramatic fireball, just the sudden and complete absence of a threat that had seemed insurmountable seconds before. "Holy shit," breathed Petty Officer First Class Jake Bones Williams, the team's medic, as he witnessed destruction delivered with surgical precision. The enemy position had been eliminated with such clinical efficiency that it took a moment for the reality to sink in. This wasn't close air support in any conventional sense. This was something else entirely, something that operated according to rules that hadn't been written in any manual. Ghost Rider's voice returned, still carrying that incongruous warmth despite the devastation she was unleashing. "That's one down, sugar. Y'all just keep your heads down while I clean house." The casual tone made the violence seem almost domestic, as if she were discussing weekend chores rather than systematically dismantling a complex enemy defensive position, with weapons that existed in the shadow spaces between acknowledged and classified. The second target lasted slightly longer, its crew managing to traverse their weapon toward the sound of approaching death before they joined their comrades in whatever afterlife awaited those who chose violence as their profession. The elimination was equally swift and precise, a demonstration of both technological superiority and the kind of tactical awareness that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Ghost Rider was operating at a level that transcended normal military aviation, combining situational awareness with target engagement capabilities that redefined what was possible in close air support operations. Rodriguez found himself simultaneously grateful and terrified. Grateful because his men were no longer facing annihilation, but terrified because he was witnessing capabilities that officially didn't exist. The aircraft above them moved like a phantom, its weapons systems operating with a precision that suggested technology decades ahead of anything he'd been briefed on. Each shot was perfect, each target eliminated with the efficiency of someone who had reduced killing to an art form practiced at the highest level. The enemy began to realize that something had changed in the tactical equation. The confident, coordinated fire that had kept the SEALs pinned down began to falter as position after position went silent. What had been a well-orchestrated ambush was rapidly becoming a one-sided slaughter, with death arriving from an invisible angel who seemed to know exactly where every threat was positioned before they could react to her presence. But Ghost Rider wasn't finished, and the mountain still held secrets that would be paid for in blood and measured in the kind of courage that couldn't be manufactured or faked. The third machine gun nest had learned from the fate of its predecessors and ceased firing, its crew hoping that silence might purchase survival. They were wrong. Ghost Rider's sensors could detect the heat signatures of human bodies, could track the electromagnetic emissions of their equipment, could read the story of their positions written in infrared and radio frequencies. Hiding was no longer an option when your hunter possessed eyes that saw through darkness, through camouflage, through the very earth itself. Target 3 is trying to play possum. Ghost Rider's voice carried a note of amusement that seemed wildly inappropriate given the circumstances. Bless their hearts, they think if they stop shooting, I'll stop seeing them. The elimination that followed was as swift and final as the others, another position simply ceasing to exist with the kind of finality that left no room for doubt or hope. Staff Sergeant McKinnon was tracking the destruction through his high-powered scope, trying to understand the mechanics of what he was witnessing. "I'm not seeing any muzzle flashes, no missile trails, nothing. How the hell is she doing this?" The question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, more of a professional soldier trying to understand a new reality that challenged everything he thought he knew about modern warfare. The answer came not from his teammates but from the Tactical Operations Center, where Major General Morrison had finally managed to access classified files that required clearance levels she wasn't sure she possessed. What she found there made her understand why Ghost Rider's voice had seemed familiar, and why the aircraft overhead was performing at levels that defied conventional understanding. The pilot wasn't just anyone. She was someone who had supposedly died 3 years ago in a classified operation that had never officially happened. "Mother of God," Morrison whispered as the pieces began to fall into place. The voice belonged to Captain Alexandra Ghost Thorne, formerly of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, officially listed as killed in action during Operation Nightshade. But the woman whose voice was currently orchestrating the systematic destruction of enemy positions was very much alive, flying an aircraft that didn't appear in any inventory, using weapons systems that existed in the deepest black programs that even generals weren't always briefed on. The SEALs below remained unaware of their savior's identity, focused entirely on the immediate tactical situation that was rapidly shifting in their favor. The coordinated enemy fire that had threatened to overwhelm them was being dismantled with methodical precision, each threat eliminated before it could adapt to the new reality. Ghost Rider was conducting a master class in air-to-ground combat, demonstrating capabilities that redefined what was possible when technology, training, and determination converged in the hands of someone who refused to accept defeat as an option. Rodriguez keyed his radio, his voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and professional curiosity. "Ghost Rider Bravo 61, your support is outstanding, but we still need to complete our primary mission. The HVT is somewhere in that compound, and we need to get to him before." His transmission was cut short by the distinctive crack of a sniper rifle, the bullet passing close enough to his position that he could feel the displacement of air. "Well now," Ghost Rider's voice carried a new edge, the warmth replaced by something colder and more dangerous. "Looks like somebody's got a designated marksman who thinks he's clever. Sugar, you just made this personal." The threat in her voice was delivered with the same southern charm, but underneath it lay the promise of retribution that would be both swift and final. She had been conducting a surgical operation, eliminating threats with minimal collateral damage, but someone had just crossed a line that transformed mercy into wrath. The sniper who had taken the shot at Rodriguez was positioned in a rocky outcropping approximately 800 meters from the SEAL's position, expertly camouflaged and equipped with a rifle that could reach out and touch targets at ranges that most soldiers couldn't even imagine. He was a professional, trained in the art of patient killing, and he had been waiting for the perfect shot that would eliminate the enemy team leader and break their organization. What he hadn't counted on was becoming the focus of attention from someone who operated by different rules entirely. Ghost Rider's aircraft adjusted its position with the fluid grace of a dancer, bringing sensors and weapons to bear on the sniper's position with the kind of precision that suggested she knew exactly where he was hiding before he had even pulled the trigger. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the reversal would be both instructive and final. The mountain was about to learn that some wolves traveled alone, and some angels carried swords that could cut through stone itself. The elimination of the sniper was different from the others, more personal, more deliberate, executed with the kind of precision that sent a message to anyone else who might be watching. The rocky outcropping that had provided concealment was carved away with surgical accuracy, exposing the sniper to the harsh light of accountability before delivering judgment that was both swift and irrevocable. The demonstration served multiple purposes: eliminating a threat, demoralizing the remaining enemy forces, and establishing that Ghost Rider's protection of the SEALs was absolute. "Problem solved, boys," Ghost Rider announced with satisfaction. "Now about that HVT y'all mentioned. I'm seeing thermal signatures in the main building, 3 individuals, one of which looks like he might be under restraint. That your package?" The intelligence was delivered with the casual competence of someone who could see through walls, read heat signatures like books, and process tactical information faster than most people could understand it. Rodriguez felt a surge of renewed hope as the tactical picture began to clarify. Their primary objective was still achievable. The overwhelming enemy resistance was being systematically dismantled, and they had air support that operated at levels that bordered on the supernatural. "Ghost Rider, that matches our intelligence. Can you provide overwatch while we move to the objective?" The request was made with the confidence of someone who had just witnessed miracles and was beginning to believe that this mission might actually have a successful conclusion. "Sugar, I've got you covered 6 ways from Sunday. You just worry about getting your boys home safe, and let Mama worry about anyone who tries to stop you." The promise was delivered with absolute conviction, the voice of someone who had never broken a commitment and wasn't about to start now. The SEALs began their advance toward the compound, moving with renewed confidence under the protective umbrella of their guardian angel. But the mountain wasn't finished with its lessons, and the enemy had one more surprise waiting, something that would test not just Ghost Rider's capabilities, but the very foundations of everything she believed about duty, honor, and the price of protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The final act of this drama was about to unfold, and it would be written in fire and measured in the kind of sacrifice that defined heroes long after the shooting stopped and the medals were awarded. The compound's main building loomed before the SEALs like a concrete monument to paranoia and desperation. Its walls were thick enough to stop small arms fire, its windows were barred and positioned to provide defensive advantages, and its construction suggested that whoever had built it understood that visitors might not always come with peaceful intentions. But the SEALs were professionals who specialized in gaining entry to places where they weren't wanted, and the systematic elimination of external threats had given them the tactical space they needed to apply their particular skills. Rodriguez signaled for his team to take up assault positions, each man knowing his role in the choreographed violence that was about to unfold. Breaching charges were placed with precision born of countless training exercises. Flashbangs were positioned to maximize disorientation, and weapons were brought to bear on potential threat vectors. The SEALs had done this dance so many times that it had become muscle memory, a deadly ballet performed by artists who understood that perfection meant the difference between going home and becoming statistics. "Ghost Rider, Bravo 6-1, we're about to make entry. Keep an eye out for squirters." Rodriguez's voice carried the controlled tension of someone who understood that the most dangerous moments often came when success seemed assured. Buildings could hide surprises, and desperate people often made desperate choices that could turn routine operations into disasters that haunted survivors for the rest of their lives. "Copy that, Sugar. I've got thermals on 3 individuals inside, 2 mobile, 1 stationary and likely restrained. No movement detected outside the primary structure, but I'm picking up electromagnetic emissions that suggest someone's been busy with communications equipment. Y'all might want to move fast before word gets out that the party's been crashed." Ghost Rider's intelligence was delivered with the casual competence that had characterized all her support, but underneath the warmth lay the tactical awareness of someone who understood that battles could be won or lost in the seconds between decision and action. The breach was textbook perfect. Charges detonated simultaneously, flashbangs followed microseconds later, and the SEALs flowed through the opening like water finding its level. The interior of the building revealed itself in the harsh white light of tactical illumination, shadows dancing away from corners where threats might hide, concrete walls echoing with the controlled chaos of professionals at work. Two enemy combatants were neutralized within seconds of entry, their weapons unfired, and their resistance overwhelmed by speed, surprise, and violence of action. The high-value target was found in a back room, restrained but alive, his condition suggesting recent interrogation but nothing that couldn't be treated. He was a mid-level Taliban commander whose information could potentially save dozens of coalition lives, and his extraction was the reason 8 of America's finest had risked everything in this god-forsaken corner of Afghanistan. The mission that had begun as a routine snatch and grab had evolved into something far more complex, but the objective remained unchanged: get the package and get out alive. "Package secured," Rodriguez reported, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a job well done despite the complications. "Bravo 6-1 is ready for exfiltration. Ghost Rider, can you provide escort for our egress?" The request was made with the confidence of someone who had come to rely on capabilities that seemed to transcend normal military aviation, but also with the awareness that miracles had their limits and luck could change without warning. Ghost Rider's response carried a new note of urgency that hadn't been present before. "Boys, we've got a problem. I'm detecting multiple vehicle signatures approaching from the northeast. Looks like somebody called for reinforcements. Estimate 30 to 40 personnel in technical vehicles, ETA approximately 8 minutes. Y'all need to move and move now." The intelligence was delivered with the calm professionalism of someone who had faced impossible odds before, but the implications were clear. Their window of opportunity was closing rapidly. The SEALs didn't need encouragement. Within minutes, they were moving toward their planned exfiltration point, carrying the HVT and maintaining the disciplined movement that had kept them alive through countless operations. But 8 minutes wasn't much time to cover rough terrain while carrying a prisoner and maintaining operational security, and the approaching enemy force represented a threat that even Ghost Rider's capabilities might not be able to neutralize completely. The mathematical equation of war was about to test everyone involved, and the variables included factors that couldn't be calculated in advance. As they moved through the rocky terrain toward their extraction point, the SEALs could hear the distant rumble of engines echoing off the mountain walls, the sound of approaching trouble that would arrive with the kind of firepower that could turn their successful mission into a catastrophic failure. But above them, Ghost Rider circled with the patience of a predator, her sensors tracking the approaching threat while calculating angles, distances, and probabilities with the cold precision of someone who had learned to make death an exact science. The final test was approaching, and it would determine whether this story ended with heroes coming home or with another entry in the casualty reports that marked America's longest war. Ghost Rider's voice crackled through their radios one more time, carrying a tone that mixed determination with something that might have been affection. "Don't you worry, boys. Mama's got one more trick up her sleeve, and I didn't come this far to let y'all down now." The promise was delivered with absolute conviction, but the approaching enemy force represented a challenge that would test even her extraordinary capabilities. The mountain was about to witness the kind of stand that defined legends, fought by someone who had already been declared dead, and was about to prove that reports of her demise had been greatly exaggerated. The approaching convoy consisted of 5 technical vehicles, pickup trucks mounting heavy machine guns and recoilless rifles, plus approximately 30 fighters armed with assault rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and the kind of tactical knowledge that came from years of fighting in terrain they knew better than their own names. They moved with the confidence of people who understood that overwhelming force could compensate for technological disadvantages, and their communications, chatter suggested they knew exactly what they were facing and weren't intimidated by the odds. Ghost Rider's sensors painted a detailed picture of the approaching threat, analyzing vehicle types, probable armament, movement patterns, and tactical formations with the kind of precision that turned intelligence into actionable advantage. But even her advanced capabilities had limits, and 30 to 40 determined fighters represented a challenge that would require more than surgical strikes and precision targeting. This would require a level of commitment that went beyond professional duty and entered the realm of personal sacrifice. Bravo 6-1, you've got approximately 6 minutes before they reach engagement range. I need you to keep moving toward the extraction point while I deal with our uninvited guests. And boys, her voice carried a note of finality that made Rodriguez's blood run cold. If something happens to me up here, you tell whoever asks that Ghost Rider sends her regards. The transmission ended before anyone could respond, leaving the SEALs to wonder what their guardian angel was planning and whether they would live to understand the answer. The first technical vehicle crested a ridge approximately 2 kilometers from the SEALs' position, its mounted weapon sweeping the terrain ahead with the mechanical precision of experienced hunters. The crew was alert, disciplined, and completely unprepared for what happened next. Ghost Rider's aircraft materialized out of the darkness like death itself, weapon systems engaging with the kind of precision that turned tactical vehicles into abstract art painted in fire and twisted metal. The elimination was so swift and complete that the other vehicles didn't initially understand what had happened to their lead element. But Ghost Rider wasn't finished, and the Mountain was about to learn that some angels weren't content with passive protection. Sometimes they descended with flaming swords and the kind of wrath that redefined battlefield mathematics. The second vehicle suffered the same fate as the first, then the third, each elimination executed with clinical precision that demonstrated capabilities beyond anything in the standard military inventory. The enemy force was being systematically dismantled by someone who fought according to rules that hadn't been written in any manual. The surviving fighters dismounted and sought cover among the rocks, their training taking over as they attempted to adapt to a threat they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't understand. But Ghost Rider's sensors could track their heat signatures, their electromagnetic emissions, their very breathing patterns through technology that existed in the shadow spaces between acknowledged and classified. The hunters had become the hunted, and the reversal was being orchestrated by someone who had redefined air-to-ground combat through the simple expedient of refusing to accept limitations as final. Rodriguez could hear the destruction echoing off the mountain walls, each explosion marking another threat eliminated and another few minutes of life purchased for his team. But he could also hear something else in Ghost Rider's voice during her brief transmissions, a weariness that spoke of systems pushed beyond their limits and reserves that were finite despite seeming infinite. Even guardian angels had boundaries, and the mathematics of warfare eventually came due no matter how skilled the practitioner or how advanced the technology. The realization hit him with the force of revelation. Ghost Rider wasn't just providing air support, she was fighting a delaying action that was costing her something precious and irreplaceable. Each engagement was draining resources that couldn't be replenished. Each elimination was burning through capabilities that operated according to laws of physics that even black programs couldn't circumvent forever. She was spending herself like currency to purchase time for his team, and the exchange rate was measured in something more valuable than money or metals. Ghost Rider, Bravo 6-1, what's your status? Rodriguez's question carried the weight of someone who understood that heroes weren't immortal and miracles had prices that someone had to pay. The response, when it came, confirmed his worst fears while simultaneously demonstrating the kind of commitment that defined the very best of America's warriors, regardless of whether their service was acknowledged in official records or remembered only in the prayers of those they had saved. "Oh, I'm just peachy, sugar," Ghost Rider replied, her voice still carrying that incongruous warmth despite the strain that was beginning to show through the facade. "Got a few more presents to deliver before this party's over. Y'all just keep moving toward home, and don't look back no matter what you hear. Some things are better left as memories than explanations." The transmission carried undertones that made it clear this conversation might be their last, and the weight of unspoken gratitude hung between them like incense in a cathedral. The remaining enemy fighters had taken cover in a rocky depression that provided excellent concealment from conventional air attack, but Ghost Rider wasn't conventional in any sense that mattered. Her aircraft adjusted position with fluid grace, bringing sensors and weapons to bear from an angle that negated their tactical advantage through the simple expedient of operating in 3 dimensions, while they were limited to 2. The elimination that followed was as precise as all the others, but the energy expenditure required for the unusual attack vector registered in systems that were already operating beyond their design parameters. Warning lights began illuminating in her cockpit like a Christmas tree designed by someone with a particularly dark sense of humor. Fuel reserves were approaching critical levels, ammunition stores were depleted beyond minimum safety margins, and various systems were showing the kind of strain indicators that suggested her aircraft was being pushed far beyond anything its designers had ever intended. But the SEALs were still 3 minutes from their extraction point, and the enemy still had approximately 15 fighters who were now fully aware that they were facing something extraordinary and were adapting their tactics accordingly. The final act was approaching, and it would be written in the kind of sacrifice that defined heroes long after the medals were awarded, and the official records were sealed in vaults that most people would never know existed. Ghost Rider's aircraft began its final descent toward a confrontation that would test not just her capabilities, but her willingness to pay any price necessary to ensure that 8 of America's finest warriors made it home to their families. The mountain was about to witness the kind of stand that legends were built on, fought by someone who had already been declared dead, and was about to prove that some commitments transcended death itself. The mathematics of the situation were brutally simple. 15 enemy fighters with small arms and RPGs versus 1 aircraft operating beyond its design limits, with a pilot who had already exceeded every reasonable expectation of duty and sacrifice. But mathematics didn't account for the human heart, and Ghost Rider's heart beat with the rhythm of someone who had never learned to quit when good people needed help. The final engagement was about to begin, and it would be measured not in tactical victories or strategic objectives, but in the kind of love that could only be expressed through violence applied with surgical precision in defense of those who couldn't defend themselves. Bravo 6-1, you are 2 minutes from extraction. I need you to trust me one more time and not look back no matter what happens next. Y'all have been the best students an old teacher could ask for, and I'm proud to have shared the sky with warriors like you. Ghost Rider's voice carried the weight of finality, but also the satisfaction of someone who had found meaning in service and purpose in sacrifice. The transmission ended, leaving the SEALs to wonder what their guardian angel was planning, and whether they would live to honor the memory of someone who had given everything to ensure they made it home. The remaining enemy fighters had learned from the fate of their comrades and were employing tactics that maximized their concealment while providing mutual support against air attack. They moved in small groups, used natural terrain features to mask their signatures, and coordinated their fire in ways that would challenge even the most advanced aircraft. But Ghost Rider wasn't just advanced. She was revolutionary, operated by someone who had redefined air combat through the simple expedient of refusing to accept defeat as an option. Her aircraft dove toward the enemy positions with the fluid grace of a falcon stooping on prey, weapons systems engaging multiple targets simultaneously, while defensive systems worked overtime to deflect incoming fire. The engagement was unlike anything in the standard tactical playbook, combining precision strikes with evasive maneuvers that seemed to defy the basic laws of physics. Ghost Rider was writing her own rules in real time, guided by instincts honed through years of combat and a determination that transcended normal human limitations. But even extraordinary capabilities had boundaries, and Ghost Rider's aircraft was beginning to show the cumulative effects of sustained combat operations beyond design specifications. Systems that had operated flawlessly began to develop intermittent faults. Fuel consumption accelerated beyond sustainable levels, and various warning indicators suggested that the margin between success and catastrophic failure was measured in seconds rather than minutes. The price of miracles was being paid in real time, calculated in systems pushed beyond their limits and reserves that were finite despite seeming inexhaustible. Rodriguez could hear the change in Ghost Rider's voice during her increasingly brief transmissions. The strain was beginning to show through her southern charm, replaced by the clipped professionalism of someone managing multiple critical situations simultaneously. 30 seconds to extraction, boys. Don't stop, don't look back, and don't ever forget that some angels wear flight suits instead of halos. The message was delivered with the authority of someone who had earned the right to give final orders, but also with the warmth of someone who genuinely cared about the people she was protecting. The helicopter that arrived for extraction was a welcome sight, a Black Hawk appearing over the ridgeline with the precision timing that marked truly professional aviation. But even as the SEALs moved toward their salvation, they could hear the continuing sounds of combat echoing off the mountain walls. Ghost Rider was still fighting, still buying them time, still proving that some commitments couldn't be broken by enemy action, equipment failure, or even the basic laws of physics when they conflicted with the deeper laws of the human heart. As the Black Hawk lifted off with its precious cargo, Rodriguez keyed his radio one final time. Ghost Rider, Bravo 6-1, package is secure and airborne. Thank you doesn't begin to cover what you've done for us tonight. His words carried the weight of gratitude that couldn't be adequately expressed, the kind of debt that could only be honored through living lives worthy of the sacrifice that had made them possible. The response, when it came, would be the last transmission anyone would receive from Ghost Rider, and it would be remembered long after the official reports were filed and the classified documents were locked away. You just take care of each other, sugar. And remember, her voice was interrupted by the sound of alarms and the distinctive crack of systems failing under stress. Sometimes the best angels are the ones nobody talks about. The transmission ended in static, leaving the SEALs to wonder about the fate of their guardian angel and the aircraft that had seemed to operate according to rules that transcended normal understanding of what was possible in military aviation. The mountain fell silent, its secrets locked away in stone and classified files, but the legend of Ghost Rider would live on in the memories of those who had witnessed her stand, and the families who welcomed home warriors who should have died in a rocky depression thousands of miles from anything that mattered. The official records would never mention her name, the medal citations would never acknowledge her contribution, but in the places where it mattered most, in the hearts of those she had saved, Captain Alexandra Ghost Thorne would live forever, an angel who had descended from the darkness to prove that some commitments transcended death itself. 3 days later, Major General Morrison received a classified report that would haunt her dreams for years to come. The WR